The cost of living is not very high here compared to a lot of places. I certainly hear the complaints about it's expensive for housing.
Said when the goalpost keeps getting pushed further back, you just don't know what to save for. You can save your entire life and not quite make it to where you need to be.
We have to care about the people who need homes, and their ability to have some passive income is not more important than these people's ability to have a home to live in.
Every city has a housing crisis almost, and your poor people are going to be more disproportionately affected.
People just keep building and building, and low-income and no-income individuals, they're really struggling.
I think a lot of them are like us, where they have hope and holding on to staying in Hayes, but eventually it's going to break them and they're going to start looking elsewhere.
The big word that associates with Hayes is the word community. We have the university, we have a wonderful medical center, and we're on I-70. So those are three big things. We have made big strides in the last 5 years, but there's still a long way to go. And it's especially because housing relates to everything. If you need to increase our workforce, which we do, they have to have housing. We want to attract retirees to the community, we have to have housing. So it's kind of the basis of everything we do.
We're looking for a single-family home so we can work on our own interests. I'm a local musician here in Hayes, and so I'd like to have a place where I can teach lessons and practice and work on stuff. Right now, I work out of the basement here. And then Chris is a fantastic artisan in his own way. He does leather crafts, he does electronic work. And so we would both like to have space to work on the things we love. It seems really impossible for the average person to try to buy a home in Hayes.
It seems like the goalposts keep getting moved further and further back.
We rented in Hayes, and we've both rented in Hayes for years and years and years, but we didn't have the best experience there, and then our rent went from $650 to $850. Because of that, we were laying in bed, and we were like, I wonder if there's any houses available. We immediately knew we could not afford a house in Hayes. That was never anything that we even planned on. We looked at them and we were like, yeah, we're not getting loans for any of those. I was in college and he was a superintendent at his job with commercial builders. But together we made $50,000, maybe $60,000. Because we were only approved for a $90,000 loan, which was all we were comfortable paying anyways. You could not buy a house in Hayes for that.
It just feels like anytime we find anything that looks promising, it's so far out of our price range, it might as well be, a $1.5 million mansion at that point. And then every time we find something that looks affordable, it used to be a rental, and if you take a tour through it, all the doors have holes in them, or there's something completely wrong with the foundation, and it's it would cost more than the house to fix it.
For what is in this area, I don't think the housing prices are acceptable at all. It's safe to assume that's because people are purchasing all of the property and then renting them and not maintaining them to poor college students.
The students are wonderful to have in Hayes. The college is one of our best assets. Our two largest employers are the medical center and the college. However, students skew the housing market, and not in a good way. So when you take a single-family home out of the market and turn it into 2 apartments or 3 apartments, the person that is benefiting from that monetarily is always going to be able to make more money and therefore pay more for something than if you're just shopping for a single-family home for your family or yourself. So again, the students skew the market that way too, in something that is essentially designed for a single family.
I think it's prevalent everywhere, but I think Hayes itself is unique just because of the situation that we're in with the revolving door of the college students, the exploitation of students that kind of makes its own kind of
exacerbated
bubble,
problem. Yeah.
I know for the last couple of years we've been above 3,500 for sure. I think right now for our population, we're about half returners, half first-year students. I think we make a good mix of both. I have seniors that live with us. I have grad students that live with us. And I also have like upper 20s with us, right? So I have a lot of mixture. It depends where everybody's at in life and what they're looking for and like wanting. I think sometimes a student needs to realize, I'm like, all right, it's time. I want to look at what off-campus looks like. I've talked to a lot of students asking like, oh, nice, how much you paying for rent? I've heard all the way from like a student's pay anywhere from $275 a month to a student that paid $800 a month. I think there's a vast variety of and it depends how many bedrooms there are and how many people they're fitting in a house.
Most of the homes that are affordable houses in Hayes are bought up by management groups that are then renting those houses out at extremely high cost, in large part because they're expecting a 4-bedroom house to be split between 5 or 6 or 7 college students who then are each paying something more affordable.
I think the biggest issue is that as a college town and a well-established college town, we have a lot of landlords that are very, very proud of their properties that they don't take care of. And so they make it their job to be landlords, and they make their money that way, but they don't invest back into their properties. And when they get dilapidated enough, then they sell them to whoever wants to be the next landlord. And so it's this ever-growing cycle of them accumulating more and more properties or handing off worse properties, and it just brings down the quality overall, but then raises the prices and the demand.
There's a lot of things contributing to it. There is a lack of jobs that pay a livable wage in Hayes, but it's not enough, especially not enough for a family. And then you go kind of down from there.
Over the last few years, yes, there's been a need for rental assistance a lot. We get a lot of families that come in regularly that apply for assistance. Our mission is to help low-income families afford rental properties within the city limits of Hayes and help them become a little more self-sufficient, where they're not struggling so much to get by. Some of the biggest challenges is probably trying to get certain applicant families. When they come in, they're transient or homeless, and they come in and they have no source of income whatsoever, so they can't even afford basic necessities. Well, we have to explain to them, we can't really start you in this program. That's not what this is for. We don't provide enough service for you to do that. Certainly, we could sign off on you going and finding a unit, but if you can't even pay your utilities and you can't even buy basic necessities, food and electricity, water, and whatever else you might need, we don't want to exacerbate the problem. You need a lot more help than what we're able to provide for you.
We've worked with a lot of people who are being evicted from their homes because they'll have a $200 raise in rent from one month to the next, and they cannot make that rent. So we have to try to find them places to live, but trying to find them places to live is oftentimes impossible. We've had to help families move out of Hayes to Plainville or Victoria or Ellis or much further, because once these hikes happen in their rent, they just can't survive.
There are approximately 60 families that are homeless within our district, and not necessarily, living on the streets, but they count them as homeless if they're, couch surfing or living with other family members.
We've also seen it start to affect people who don't have resources to make a change, to make a move, and it's creating an ever-growing homeless population in Hayes. And we don't typically see it. A lot of people don't recognize it because a lot of the people that are homeless in Hayes are living on a friend's couch or living at in a family's spare bedroom, but they're still without the means to have their own home. During the months of December, January, February, when it's too cold to survive outside, we have a shelter for people to come to. And we had consistent use of that this year. It was used every night that it was open. And that's a significant change in Hayes to have that kind of need. But it's a need that's growing.
Our shelter is in an undisclosed location in Ellis County. and we can serve approximately 14 people in the shelter at a time, whether they're single, married with children, or whole families. Often our shelter is full because there's just not enough housing, and there are more people in need than our house can handle. We provided last year almost 3,000 bed nights of shelter. About 20% of those folks were to children.
They may not be sleeping in the streets where we see homeless like you do in the city, but I think it's enough of a problem that we need to keep our eyes on it.
Unfortunately, a lot of our interactions with the unhoused and Hayes are through PD. A lot of it is with mental issues. We don't do a very good job of recognizing and taking care of mental health and proactively addressing mental health issues in Kansas. But I don't have a department that services and deals with the unhoused right now. We give money to the Care Council every year. I know some of that money goes to First Call for Help and to other agencies that deal with the unhoused.
Ellis County is hard to be homeless in because we do not have a shelter. Since we are the service hub, people do come here frequently, or, surrounding counties, drop off at our county line and think that, since we have all these, resources and agencies that we're going to be able to help. But with no shelter, it's kind of hard. So
People don't want a homeless shelter. Homeless shelters are associated with crime. They're associated with, a dip in the appearance and the quality of an area. It's not necessarily true, but that's the association that's made. It's a more difficult thing because housing and homelessness is seen differently than someone being hungry. There's more of a perception of moral failure that goes along with homelessness. So we don't just have to get past the money issue, we have to get past the perception of it.
We have a rapid rehousing program so that if people are victims or survivors are still struggling with housing insecurity or housing stability, we can help them with providing up to 2 years of rental assistance. We can help with utility bills, phone bills, electric bills, water bills, things like that. About 90% of victims experience some type of financial abuse, and so our services help folks that are experiencing or trying to recover from that financial abuse to remain stable, to keep them in their homes, or to quickly get them into a home once they've come into shelter, so that we don't have folks just staying in shelter for months and months and months at a time, which isn't great for people. People need the dignity of their own home, and that's one of the services that we provide.
we do have a program called First Step Housing, which is a transitional housing unit. That is transitional housing for individuals for up to 6 months. They're able to stay back there, and they do have to be working full time and working to get that first month's rent and deposit saved up. They do meet with our client service specialist once a week, and they work on things like budgeting and working on, if they don't have a job yet, they can work on their resume, things like that. A lot of individuals that come in here are recovering from drugs or alcohol, and so we're just working to help them better their lives.
So at First Call for Help, I know that this housing issue is a big deal, and they get calls on a regular basis, people who just need 1 month's rent. If I can get this month's rent, I can get past to the next month. But no one in town provides that service. And First Call for Help can't afford to because there's no funding for it. So even those kind of moment-to-moment issues, they become long-term issues because we don't have the resources to be able to provide in a moment's need. By and large, the vast majority of people I reach out to, they want to help meet that need. And that's not true everywhere. So I think Hayes has some really great opportunities to address this.
When you have a very healthy market like we do with high housing values, your lower income people are more disproportionately affected.
we use those words, dire straits, and that's a pretty strong word, but at that point it kind of was. And fortunately, about the same time as we began really looking at housing, the Grow Hayes organization hired Doug Williams as their executive director. And Doug is very knowledgeable about the community. He was a realtor and a developer in the community before he actually retired from that side of the business. And he was very creative and thoughtful in the process of how we should get started. And so where we are today is head and shoulders above where we were 5 years ago.
Grow Hayes is the economic development organization for Ellis County. We're responsible for recruitment of businesses, for helping people create businesses and expansions and that type of thing. Housing is baseline for economic development. If you don't have housing, you're not able to attract a workforce, to keep people in the community that would be part of a workforce. And so it's very critical that we have adequate housing and good choices for people. We've heard on any number of occasions where an organization, whether it be the hospital or the college or somebody, recruits a new employee, they come to our community and they can't find housing, and so they don't take the job.
Basically, we need all types of housing in Hayes. We have a housing shortage across the board. If you're looking for a $500,000 home, we have a shortage. If you're looking for an affordable home, we have a shortage. We are in an area that is sort of geographically confined, so we don't have a huge labor market. We don't have a lot of competition among builders.
Another challenge is we historically, at least in the last 15 or 20 years, we have not had builders who've been able to build at scale. They typically build 1 or 2 homes at a time, as opposed to building 10 or 15 a year. And so that's a challenge.
We struggle because we're doing our best to create housing as fast as we can, but it's probably not fast enough. But then there's also a risk reward when it comes to building housing. If you get too far ahead of the curve, you could be left with a lot of empty lots, a lot of infrastructure that has to be paid for, and then everybody else has got to pick up the tab. So we're pushing about as hard as we can on that.
And then because of the unbelievable amount of construction that's taking place in our community on commercial projects, whether it be on campus or our community center, it's hard to find subcontractors that are available and can come on a timely basis to do the work.
For people that are, sort of getting into the workforce, but have a little bit of discretionary money, we did a joint project with Heart of America Development Corporation, Grow Hayes, and the City of Hayes. And that's the Tall Grasses phases 1 through 3 on the east side of the hospital.
I'm real interested in the properties that are called Tall Grass out on 22nd Street. That was really important for me in terms of a price range for people. And it proved to be right in terms of what people wanted, because those properties, all 3 phases that are done, the houses were sold before they were out of the ground.
First 36 homes were priced at $225,000 or less. The next 18 homes were priced at $235,000 or less. And then the final 12, we were able to offer those at a little larger home, with some with 3-car garages, and those were priced at $325,000 each.
These are houses that use an incentive called a Rural Housing Incentive District, where the property taxes paid go back to the city to pay the cost of the water, the sewer, the streets, things like that, therefore keeping the cost of the houses low. These are houses that were built and sold essentially below market value to try to get people entry-level housing. So that'd be the higher end of the affordable type housing scale.
But the other thing I'm focused on is retirees. I'm real big on regionalization. I think that Hayes can be a key to the whole Northwest Kansas region. And I think that we'll be looking in the future at the possibility of retirees moving here. There's already starting to now. So one of the new housing projects we're doing is the Grove. It's a retiree-based community. It's not solely for retirees, but it's the type of homes that we're putting in there.
The Grove is going to be different. The Grove is smaller lot cottage homes, a little higher end, more for retirees that actually have some money.
There'll be a couple of different price ranges. There's going to be single-family residences. I would say those are going to be $350,000 and up. We will have some duplexes that will be probably close to double that. They're going to be very nice.
You know, affordable is a very relative thing. You know, you ask 20 people what affordable is and you'll get 20 different answers. I will just say this, based on the amount of interest we have had before even starting construction, I think there's broad interest. The prices are going to be from the 290s and up.
I think they're putting in a lot of good effort. In my conversations with people who are engaged in this process, I'm not sure they're identifying the biggest issues that we have. So while I think they're putting in a lot of good effort, I think where the effort is going needs to be adjusted. And I think rather than putting effort into new $300,000 or $400,000 homes, we need to put effort into homes that can cost $150,000 or $200,000.
What I wish we could see in our community is truly affordable housing for people who are making minimum wage and raising families. Many of these jobs don't pay a living wage, and that means that they're going to be unstably housed for the unforeseeable future. And we see a lot of housing developments now coming to Hayes, but they're in the $300,000 range, $200,000 range, and somebody who's working barely over minimum wage or not even making a living wage is not going to be able to afford that.
Sometimes you get a family that, they're working, they're making 15, 16, 20, 18 bucks an hour. They may not qualify for the program, but they can't afford some of the rent prices that are out there for their family. And so what they need is a lower level price point for rental that they can go into that they can afford.
We know we need more income qualified, low income housing. We have some developers that are looking to do that. We're doing whatever we can to try to facilitate that. And there's a lot of conversations going on in the background. We have had a company called Overland Property Group that has built several properties in town. The first generation properties are along 5th Street and Main Street. So those are built and they are subsidized with federal tax credits, which they can turn around and sell. In exchange, they have to keep those units income qualified for 20 years. So you can't make more than a certain amount to live in those units. So they have provided much needed housing for people that, only make up to a certain amount of money. Mike Graham obtained a piece of property the city owned on 10th Street. There used to be a train depot along the railroad tracks there, and this property was the actual parking for that depot. The city transferred the property to Mike Graham in exchange for him building 48 units of affordable housing there. It's over towards Hall Street. You might see some work going on there. They're not income qualified in any way, but they are targeted more towards students and people with lower incomes, but they're going to be pretty nice apartments when they're done. There's a project in the old St. Joseph School at 13th and Fort. That was a project where it turned a former school into apartments. They're not price controlled, but they're income limited. You can't make more than a certain amount to live there. So Overland Property Group bought the school from the school district. They converted the old grade school into apartments utilizing the tax credit program. Those are income qualified. They sold the back half to Mike Graham. He built apartments. So where previously we had a school or potentially a vacant school for a lot of years, we now have about 75 units down there. So it was a wonderful project in an area where we have a lot of need for housing.
In a statewide housing crisis, and it doesn't matter which quadrant of the state that we're in, whether it's to the very west and all the way to our metro in the east. There's equally needs all across the state. Every community that we visit, every award that we make has a need. So we have aging population, we have aging homes, and our resources are hopefully there to be able to create new units, new homes.
So when you drive down the street and you see a house that's 67 years old and say, well, what's this going to be like 20 years from now? You kind of have to be looking to the future.
I think Hayes has some growing problems. As a city overall, I think a lot of Hayes is improving. When we tell people that, they get involved. They want to help. They want to be part of the solution. And I think that will be true for housing as well. But we need to educate people on why this is an issue, what the issue really is, and what solutions are out there that could be enacted to make a difference here.
We need everybody's input. We look at the tax base, we look at the demographics, we make sure everybody's heard that wants to listen.
Ideally, you would like the market to solve your needs. Housing is among that. You'd like the market to solve that. But when you put incentives out there and the market's not addressing your problems, the next step is you either don't do it or you blaze your own path.